Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are getting into something a lot of us think about, hair. We're going to look at the science of why we have it, how it grows, and, why for so many of us it sometimes decides to leave. Let's really get to the root of it.
So let's start with this basic question, right? What makes our hair grow and what makes it go? Because you really can't understand hair loss until you understand how hair growth is supposed to work in the first place. What's the normal process, and what are the things that can throw it all off track?
All right, Section 1, The Secret Life of Hair, a Follicle's Journey. To really get this, we have to meet the hero of our story, the hair follicle. Before we talk about what goes wrong, we've got to understand the journey this tiny little thing goes on every single day.
It's not just a pore, it's a dynamic mini organ. That's such a great way to put it. Seriously, think of every single hair on your head growing out of its own little factory. And this factory isn't running 24/7. It has a very specific schedule, a cycle of growth, a little bit of shutdown, and then some rest.
Okay, so here's that cycle broken down. It has three main parts. First, you've got the anagen phase, that's the growth phase. And get this, it lasts for years. At any given moment, about 85% of your hair is in this active growing stage. The other two phases, catagen and telogen, they're way shorter. Catagen is this brief transition where the follicle shrinks up, and telogen is the resting phase, where it just chills for a few months before the old hair is pushed out and a new one starts growing.
So, now that we know how things are supposed to work, let's talk about what can go wrong. Disruptor number 1, when stress disrupts the cycle. And look, we're not just talking about a tough day at work here. We're talking about a major, system-wide shock that basically sends all those little hair factories into a full-blown panic. And this panic has a name, telogen effluvium. The most important word to remember here is temporary. Your follicles aren't dying, they're not gone forever. What happens is that a huge stressor basically hits a giant pause button on your whole system. It shoves a massive number of your hair follicles straight into that resting or telogen phase all at once. That's why you see this widespread shedding a few months after the stressful event. It's actually the follicles waking back up and pushing out the old hairs to start a new cycle.
And what counts as a major stressor? Well, it can be a whole range of things. We're talking about a serious illness, a major surgery, big hormonal changes, like after childbirth, or even some medications or a big dietary problem, like a major iron deficiency. It's like your body's emergency response system kicks in and says, whoa, okay, we've got bigger fish to fry right now than making hair. Let's redirect all our energy to healing. Hair growth just isn't a priority.
All right, on to disruptor number 2, the genetics of hair loss. Now this one is a totally different ballgame. We're not talking about a sudden shock anymore. This is something much slower, much more gradual, and it's something that's literally written into your DNA.
This is androgenetic alopecia, or what most of us just call male or female pattern baldness. It is by far the most common reason for hair loss, and unlike our last example, this one is permanent. So what's the cause? It all comes down to a genetic sensitivity to a hormone called DHT. For people with this genetic trait, DHT basically sends a signal to the hair follicles telling them to shrink. Over time, they get smaller and smaller. It's a process called miniaturization.
So let's put these two side by side because this is super important. Telogen effluvium is temporary. It happens suddenly, and you see thinning pretty much everywhere. On the other hand, androgenetic alopecia is permanent, it's gradual, and it happens in a very specific pattern. Think of receding hairline or thinning right on top. And this is a fantastic way to visualize what's happening. On the left, you see a normal, healthy hair cycle. See those long growth phases? Now look at the right. That's what happens with pattern hair loss. With each new cycle, that growth phase gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So the hair that grows is weaker, finer, and doesn't last as long, until eventually, that little factory just shuts down for good. Okay, let's switch gears. Our next disruptor is something else entirely. It's not about stress, it's not about genetics. Disruptor number 3, when hairstyles cause harm. This is about a physical external force acting on your hair. The official name for this is traction alopecia, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Alopecia caused by traction, or pulling. When you have this constant, prolonged tension on the hair, it literally traumatizes the follicle. Over time, this can lead to permanent scarring, which means that hair is never growing back in that spot. So, what kind of hairstyles are we talking about? Well, anything that pulls really tight for a long time. Think tight braids or cornrows, especially with heavy extensions, tight locks, or even just a really tight ponytail or bun that you wear day in and day out.
It's also worth mentioning that things like chemical relaxers can weaken the hair shaft itself, making it even more vulnerable to this kind of damage.
And this is a really, really important point. We have to remember that, as the quote says, hair often holds important cultural significance. For so many people, hairstyles are deeply tied to identity, culture, and self-expression. So the conversation here isn't about judging or telling people to just stop. It's about awareness and finding ways to protect the follicles while still honoring those important traditions.
Okay, time for our last major disruptor. Disruptor number 4. An attack from within. So we've talked about stress, we've talked about genetics, we've talked about physical pulling, but what happens when the problem is your own body? This brings us to alopecia areata. This is an autoimmune disease, which is basically a case of mistaken identity. For reasons we don't fully understand, the body's own immune system gets confused and starts attacking healthy hair follicles as if they were a virus or some other invader. This attack forces the follicles to shut down production super quickly, and the result is hair falling out, usually in these very distinct, often circular patches.
So let's wrap this up. Conclusion: understanding your hair's story. We've gone through stress, genetics, physical tension, and even an autoimmune attack. So what does this all mean? What's the big takeaway from all this?
Well, here's the main thing. Hair loss isn't just one thing. It's not a single diagnosis. As you can see here, it's a symptom that can have wildly different causes. You've got telogen effluvium from stress, androgenetic alopecia from your genes, traction alopecia from pulling, and alopecia areata from your immune system. Each one is its own unique story, and knowing the difference is everything, because it's the only way to know what's really going on.
So, what story is your hair telling? Paying attention to the little clues, like is the shedding sudden or has it been happening for years? Is it all over or just in one spot? That's what this is all about. Understanding the why behind it all empowers you to really listen to what your body is saying, and, most importantly, ask the right questions.